Thank you so much for giving us your time, first of all, and welcome to Russia. You have made some investments in China because the government is planning a big stimulus program there. What do you make of what Russia is doing, and do you see anything interesting here that you're investing in?
Starting in October, November, I did buy more Chinese shares, but I'm not buying shares in any other country in the world right now because most of the world is in serious trouble, including China. Including China, don't get me wrong. But no, I'm not investing anywhere, and I'm certainly not investing in Russia, no.
Certainly not why?
Well, I'm certainly not investing in America either, for that matter, or certainly not in the UK. But no, the Russians have lots of problems, deep-seated problems as far as I'm concerned. Perhaps there's a good chance Russia will continue to disintegrate into more than one country. No, lots of potential problems in the former Soviet Union.
Disintegrate, you mean Russia proper, into separate countries?
Oh, yeah. The Soviet Union broke up into 15 countries. Russia itself has the potential to continue to break up. Ukraine may break up. I mean, there may be lots. Kazakhstan could break up. No, this is still not stable. Whenever empires have disintegrated throughout history, the reverberations have gone on for a long, long time. So I'm sure there are certainly good investments in Russia, and if you're on the ground and you can stay with them, but not for me.
What, in your opinion, is Russia doing right, and what is Russia doing wrong in terms of handling the crisis?
Well, what they're doing wrong is they're trying to prop up their banks, which I find reprehensible. I find it bad economics and bad morality as well. The way the system's supposed to work is supposed to take the assets from the incompetent and give them to the competent, and you start over from a stronger base. Well, the Russians are making the same mistakes that the English and the Americans and everybody else are making. They're taking the assets from the competent, giving to the incompetent, and saying, now you can compete with the competent. So it weakens the whole system. Putin at least seems to understand that there is a problem with the U.S. dollar and that the world needs to address that problem. He seems to understand some of the problems that face the world better than we do in America right now. But for the most part, the Russians are making mistakes too.
You've said the pound is finished. What is your take on the ruble?
The ruble. That's a very good question. I'm not sure even if I had an answer, I'm not sure I should give it to you after what happened with the pound. No, I'm not optimistic about the future of the ruble at all. The Russians at least have natural resources to some extent, but I'm not optimistic about the continued stability of Russia. And their natural resources the reserves are declining, as you know, because they have been stripping the assets here in Russia for some time. Oil production peaked. Production of most things have peaked in Russia for the foreseeable future. So I'm not buying the ruble either.
The government announced that it would defend the ruble at 41 against the euro-dollar basket. Was that a mistake to announce a target?
It always has been in the past. The markets have learned throughout the last few centuries that you can always bet against the central banks and you will make money eventually. So when a central bank has said, don't you worry, the pound's going to stay here or the ruble's going to stay here, whatever, ultimately that has always failed if the fundamentals were not sound. And it will fail again. Then everybody knows what the target is.
What's driving now? What is driving the fall of the ruble? Is it regular people panicking and putting their money into dollars? That's one thing that we've heard from bankers even here at this forum. Or is it speculation?
No, it's mainly the Russians. In fact, whenever a currency fails throughout history, it's always started internally. The foreigners always get the blame because the politicians like to blame all their problems on foreigners because they can't vote and they're not there. Right now, I think there's something like 20 or 25% of deposits in banks in Russia or in foreign currencies by Russians, not by foreigners. So it always starts with the local people because the local people always know best what's going wrong, and they start moving out. The speculators, historically, have always joined in later.
So, but there are Russian speculators that could be involved here too. Is it mostly speculation driving this, or is this just your average bank depositor moving their money into dollars out of concern?
Well, it seems pretty obvious that it is intelligent people making intelligent decisions with their money. They can see that there are going to be problems with the ruble, so intelligent Russians have started moving out of the ruble. The ruble is down 50 or 60% here in the last few months, or last year or so. That was because of Russians seeing problems in Russia. That was not driven by foreign speculators.
The central bank saying today that it won't have to spill much blood to defend the ruble at 41. You believe them?
I don't believe any central bank, no matter what they say. I mean, the few times that central banks have been right about anything, you can count on one hand. So no, If you get your investment advice from central banks or governments, you're going to go broke. You're going to go broke fast. Don't listen to those people.
So would you short the ruble?
I am not doing anything with the ruble. No, I'm not at all. Not right now. But knowing that the central bank has drawn a line in the sand, it makes me sit up and take a little more notice about the ruble. So I'll start thinking more about it.
What's your take on oil price?
Well, the price of oil has to go much higher over the course of the next decade. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, has come out with a definitive study that oil reserves are declining at the rate of 6% a year. Well, it doesn't take much genius to figure out that in a few years there's not going to be any oil unless something happens. So the price of oil has to go much higher over the next decade or so. Whether it's going to go higher this year or not, I don't have a clue. But I do know that over the next few years it's going to go much, much higher.
What about metals, specifically titanium?
Titanium. There's no futures market in titanium, first of all, so I don't pay as much attention to it. But most countries are now, for better or for worse, spending more on their military. The Chinese, the Russians, and other countries have said they are. And if they're going to spend money on the military, titanium is one of the beneficiaries. Obviously, commercial aircraft production is going to go down, but it looks as though it's all going to be offset by military. I don't own titanium, but I would suspect if I had to do something, I'd rather own it than not own it.
When this is all done, we're all in the same boat now in this crisis boat, but when the boat reaches the shore, will countries like Russia and other emerging markets come out ahead of the game compared to developed markets, or will they be further back?
The ones that are going to come out of this ahead are the well-managed ones that have a lot of natural resources, because natural resources are going to continue to get in shorter and shorter supply. What's happening now is good for the fundamentals of raw materials. So all of those countries that produce stuff, Brazil, which is reasonably well managed now, are going to do much better than the others. So you're having a shift, a major shift from the financial centers and financial countries to the people that produce real things. Farming is going to be one of the great professions of the next 20 years. The shuffling paper on Wall Street is going to be a disastrous profession for the next 20 years. We've had major shifts like this throughout history. We're having another one now. It's not unusual. People think it's radical, but it's happened over and over and over again. So you're going to have the shift from the people who produce things, from the people who have been financial manipulators. Not manipulators, that sounds pejorative, but financial people. And the countries that are well, now, Brazil maybe. I'm not putting my money in the Congo. The Congo has a lot of natural resources, but it's not a terribly well-managed country. So you have to be sure you're in a well-managed country.
And what do you think of Russia in that respect?
As I said earlier, I'm not putting any money into it. Russia is stripping their assets. Russia's most of its reserves and most of its natural resources continue to decline. They've been doing what the communists used to accuse the capitalists of doing, of just stripping the assets. Well, the Russians have been stripping dramatically for the past 10 or 15 years.